Welcome to everybody here at the library, as well as everybody online. We're glad that you could be here for sharing our stories tonight. Tonight, our speaker will be Lausanne Green, and I think she's going to have a really interesting story. Just the fact that she has relatives from forebears from 4 different countries. The journeys and all the stories that go along with that should be really fascinating. I think that's my introduction. So with that, Lausanne, thank you.
Thank you all for being here and for taking time to be with me and to listen to my story. So I have some slides. And the people on Zoom, can you see this? Did I just close the Zoom?
No. People on Zoom cannot see your slides.
Tell them to mute also. Let me go back up and tell them. For our online audience, if you could please mute your microphones, that would be very helpful. And if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat and we will read them to the group. Thanks.
So I'm a naturalized citizen of the United States, but I was born in Jamaica to Rupert and Petunia. And Petunia was of Asian descent. So my grandfather came from China and my grandmother from East India back before it was Pakistan. So this is China. So Jamaica is a British Commonwealth, and our motto is out of many, one people. So the story that I was told when I was a child was that my grandfather was a stowaway. And it's a stowaway. He hid on a ship that came to Jamaica. So as I started to look into these stories, because Linda Carr, who apparently is one of your WIN members, asked me about, my history and what my story was, I wanted it to be accurate. So I went and I looked into why would Chinese be coming to Jamaica on ships? And apparently it was just as here in the United States, where the New World was building railroads and shops. And so they actually did have ships that came not only to the mainland US, but to these British Commonwealth islands like Jamaica. So other relatives told me, well, he wasn't a stowaway. He was a spy who posed as a businessman who really defected from his homeland. So, my husband said, well, why would you tell the tale that is the history book story when your mother said this is what happened? He was a stowaway. So on my father's side, we heard fantastic stories of my paternal grandmother's upbringing by her grandfather of African descent, who was married to a white Scottish woman. So around Thanksgiving, I was in London because my paternal aunt, who was almost 100 years old, passed away. When my sister met me there, she told me that our maiden names were derived from a Jewish Italian who farmed in Jamaica. She said that my Aunt Daphne, by the way, a pianist, who was the first Caribbean student at the Royal School of Music, thank you very much. She came on a full scholarship, had been contacted by a historian who was tracing this name and their descendants. We packed up most of Aunt Daphne's belongings and never discovered written evidence while I was in the UK of this story. However, back to trying to be accurate, I went and I started looking into Jews in Jamaica. And apparently, during the Holocaust, they hid in Jamaica. Like apparently, that and the bottom part is an encampment that was in Jamaica that had Jewish residents. And then the other picture is of a synagogue that still exists in Jamaica. And I thought was interesting was you'll notice there's sand on the ground. So I wondered, what is that about? And apparently sand muffles sound. So apparently when the Jews were practicing their faith and didn't want to be heard, the sand provided a muting effect. And then in the top picture, you'll see these fair-skinned Black people, and they're the descendants of this Italian Jew. So out of many one people, that is our motto in Jamaica. So I have here, Linda Carr met me at the Junto, which is a hotel in Columbus across from Cosi. And she very boldly walked up to me and she said, "You have a story to tell." And I had no idea what she was talking about. But she said, "You tell me your story." So I started telling her about my parents. And she said, "You shall tell that story at Wynn." So I actually discovered that we have a Jewish Italian, and we've all heard in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But what we didn't know is that in 1494, through around 1530, France and Spain waged religious wars on Italy and attempted to convert those Jews into Christians. To practice their religion, they fled to locations such as Amsterdam, Hamburg, London, and the lands of the New World, which is where Jamaica would come in, where they could practice their religion of choice more openly. At one point, there were 22,000 Jews, and now we only have a few hundred in Jamaica. So my grandfather of Italian descent meets my grandmother and asks for her hand in marriage. Remember, her heritage is African and Scottish. In an age almost immediately following slavery, I thought it was curious that a Black man would be married to a Scottish white woman. So there's my grandmother. My father was at the top picture. He's kind of blocked by the little zoom picture. And that's my mother, the one who's Asian. And then below is my mom and her parents, the Chinese grandfather, the Indian grandmother, and my mother and her sister. So Violet Louise, née Bradshaw, and she had a very English brogue, was raised by her presumably brown-skinned grandfather and his Scottish wife. And then Charlie Zhang Fook was my Chinese grandfather, and Mary Mirage was from Pakistan when it was still connected to India. And this obviously is a picture of the Taj Mahal in India. So Chinese Jamaicans, turned out that they were very prolific. So there were waves of immigrant ships to Jamaica from China, laborers and businessmen. According to one account, there were so many Jamaican Chinese unions that the English encouraged Chinese wives to join their husbands in Jamaica because the Chinese man would have a family in Jamaica and one abroad in China. So in this photograph are my Chinese relatives, and I have many cousins, and my grandfather and my uncles had many descendants, of which I am one. And then I cited the sources.
Are you in this picture?
I am not. This picture predates me, but I thought this was interesting because now my relatives are far flung. Like I have relatives in Europe and, you know, here in the United States and in the Caribbean and elsewhere, but here, a bunch of them were together. So today, this is what my family tree looks like. It's a rainbow. And that picture's over there. The one in the far bottom is my immediate nuclear family. And my daughter and my son are here. And then the two others that are pictured are not presently in this room, but I'm sure they're here with me in spirit. And then the newest person is my grandson, and that is wisdom, sage. And then as this, you see on this side, we just keep multiplying with different races and people. So, questions?
I was just curious about what what is the next piece that you might be exploring in STEM? It sounds like you've done a lot of research recently too, but, I'm just wondering are you going to continue on this wonderful
I
journey?
I really would like to. Like, I'd really like to know, beyond the holy wars, um, why did people stay? The Scottish part, for example, like I knew that the Scottish were indentured servants who came also from a holy war. But, I was telling my coworker, the race relations seemed really interesting to me, especially on the female being the Caucasian person, and my coworker is part German, part African American, and she said her German mother told her that the African American soldier had the biggest muscles she had ever seen. So who knows? Maybe my grandfather was hot. So, I'd like to know more about the couplings, like why?
And you probably don't know anything about what they encountered because of their mixed backgrounds and also just their differences from.
Yeah, so besides the actual research, it brought to mind some popular media. So there's The Crown, which was, about Queen Elizabeth's story, and she was Anglican. So when we came to the United States, my mom was looking for an Anglican church. And by the way, she ended up becoming a Lutheran minister, which is how I got to Ohio in the first place, because she went to seminary in Bexley. Right. So the Anglican Church held the royals as descendants of God. So when we came to the United States, there's no Anglican church here because, the United States was a breakaway from Britain. So there's no descendants of God on the British throne in the United States. So beyond that, like the Crown reminded me of our Christian faith. And then there was another popular story on Hulu called Black Cake. And it's about Chinese and African American or Africans in Jamaica. And that story reminded me of a tale that's been told by my sister to me about my mom, who wanted very much to be a doctor. But apparently her Chinese father gambled her tuition away. And so she was never able to go to medical school, but she was the family healer. Like she studied herbs and medicine. And, whenever anybody complained of something, she knew how to fix it. And then there's another story that came to mind that I'm blanking on, but, popular media has taken up some of this to do some of the social stories behind it.
Do those media, do those shows help you to think about how people settled in that place or any of the challenges?
Yes, so Black Cake especially because women's rights continue to evolve, right? But Black Cake did a lot on sexual violence. And, for me, that was difficult to watch because I would kind of try to live in a safe space or a happy space. But I'm sure that some of that was very true and very real.
So what do your children think about their heritage?
They're very confused by it. You can ask them directly. Buffy?
Went to and obviously like a lot of people from seeing you directly can't deduce that you're part Chinese, even though my grandma, as you saw in the slideshows, very Asian. But once people do start to realize their image and whatnot, it does start to open up a lot of corridors. So there's a large populace of Asian Americans. I have a few. They're very welcoming, but part of that is due to the fact that they realize I have that heritage. So they would try to put me onto a lot of Asian culture that I didn't really have because of Jamaican in nationality. So I think it's good. I feel like I can project that now.
Well, it's just the online.
Yeah, basically, it just opened up doors for me with other individuals. As far as what I think about our heritage in general, I think it's kind of cool. A lot of people, I feel like, come from a streamlined source. Like, you have a lot of people who, even though you may have Slovakian, Irish, and whatnot in your blood, it's still considered like white, as you were to check it on the box, you know? And so while it is diverse, I feel like like I said, it's more streamlined. Whereas with my mother, she comes from four different sources, and my father comes from his own sources. So it's like a melting pot in my blood. So it's kind of cool. I don't know what she thinks about it. She's young.
Do you want to say, you think? Sorry. Well, I'm sorry, what do you check when you?
Yeah, I'll put African American and Chinese, but otherwise I'll.
I'm sick right now, so mind my voice, but I think it's really cool knowing where I came from. And watching this presentation was really inspiring because I was like, wow, some of that I didn't even know, so pretty cool to see. But for me personally, when people look at me, I'm like light skinned, I'm the lightest in my sibling group. So a lot of people have questions to me like, oh, what are you? Like, and then I often get like people assuming that I'm mixed with like white and black. And so it's like a cool kind of like segue to tell them, oh, like, little do you know, like, a lot. And actually built some pretty cool connections and pretty cool like stories for me to be able to tell and to get to know people in a different way by kind of like having this to talk about, if that makes sense.
I see we have one chat. Okay, I'm sorry. The question was, how do my children feel about being from this bloodline? Professor Hera, I saw that you're on there. Do you have any questions? Does anybody on the Zoom have any other?
I don't necessarily have any questions. I just want to tell you how much I love hearing your story and hear you present. And the icing on the cake is to get to hear your children speak. It's just a wonderful story, and I'm glad to hear it.
Thanks for coming. Thank you all for the support. There's chips. Made out of plastic, just like a big banana.
Your background maybe important to work.
Take it away, take it away.
The question for Zoom, if there's still people on Zoom, is how does my background inform my work, and to tell a little bit about my work. So I've been working with the Ohio Community Corrections Association for about 23 years. And they are a trade association of halfway houses and detention facilities across the state of Ohio. So they're run by nonprofits, and they seek to help people who have a conviction to re-enter society and become taxpayers, do family reunification, maybe anger management, sex offenders, programming, behavioral health care for mentally ill and substance use disorders. I don't do any of that. I do policy. So I work with legislators on policy that affects these members. And then I also do events. So like we do an annual conference, and we do trainings for people with CEUs for social workers and chemical dependency counselors. My mother was a huge advocate, and my dad actually really believed in equity and that all people should be really treated equally. So when we came to this country, my mother actually advocated for migrant farm workers. And so she also went out to Appalachia, and she would tell me, she'd say, you know, there are third world countries in the United States. And you can see that still today if you ever take a Greyhound bus from Ohio to Fort Lauderdale, because I did that to travel to see my family. And there are places here, even in Columbus, you know, where there's no running water. Like, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to Colonial Village that was recently shut down in latitude 420 or 525. There are huge complexes where slumlords come in and they charge regular rent to people and they don't get livable homes. So my mother would advocate strongly against what was wrong. And like I said, my dad was more quiet, but they both raised us to say, you know, wrong is wrong and right is right. And I've taken that with me because every job I've ever had was one that I felt mission driven. And so my passion today is around affordable and fair housing.
Can you talk a little bit about Jamaica, growing up there, what it was like?
Absolutely. So that's happier. You know, my daughter says that whenever I go there, I'm younger. You know, like all of a sudden I'm freer and I just seem more alive, because for me, Jamaica is home. So even though, you know, all my loved ones are here, Jamaica's in my DNA. So the sea is gorgeous, the weather is gorgeous, you know, um, the language is lyrical and musical, and it's home. I did not want to come to the States. You know, I came because the politics in Jamaica were bad. And so my parents who, like in Jamaica, it's different than here. Like in the little piece that we wrote up, pretty much education is a must. There's an anticipation and expectation that everybody does something. If you're not going to be a degreed person, you're going to do a trade, you're going to work. There's, you know, no welfare. You work a farm, you know what, you work. So at the time my parents left, it was called a brain drain, where the degreed professionals were coming abroad to escape the bad economics. And I'm gonna do a shout out. Miss Mabel Messam and Makita Messam are from Jamaica, and Mabel it must have driven from Cleveland to be here. So I'm very touched. Makita was my roommate at Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. So.
What language they speak in Jamaica, or how many they?
So Patois is the dialect, and it was a pidgin language. So it was a trading language. And on the back table, my son calls it Google Translate. But there's like a little book that says how to speak Jamaican. So, you know, since all these different, now, you know, cultures were melding, you know, they had to have some kind of bridge language. And it's called Patois.
How old were you? I'm sorry.
That's the same question.
How old were you when you came to?
I was 11. Yeah.
Now, how often do you get to go back?
I used to, when my parents were alive, we went annually, but not so much anymore.
Is that where Bob Marley is from?
Absolutely.
So did you see the movie?
I did.
You know, there was something on the radio or television just this week or whatever, where a person who was involved with language was talking about how they got teachers to teach the people who were gonna play all the different, because there were many different kinds of dialect or whatever in that. I didn't know it was so, it's, you know, he said they really had coaches there the whole time just to get it right. And I don't know what you thought.
So the question was, is that where Bob Marley's from? And did we know that there were linguistic coaches on site? And I did notice that in the credits that said linguistic coaches. So, but I think they did a good job. I thought they were relatable and they seemed not so bad. Like sometimes I have criticisms on Jamaicans and I'm like, oh, you know, but they were good. Thank you. When visiting a synagogue in an overseas country, we were told that the sign on the floor requested that Israelites travel through all those years they were wandering in the wilderness. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, could you repeat that so we can hear?
Oh, certainly. When visiting a synagogue in an overseas country, we were told that the sand on the floor represented the desert that the Israelites traveled through all those years they were wandering in the wilderness. And that's from Evelyn.
Wow.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, please take some time to, oh, nice.
Yeah, are there any other countries that you're gonna visit to do more background check on your like actual face-to-face?
So my son is asking whether or not I'm gonna visit other countries to do more research. So my sister actually went to China and she took my grandfather's landing papers. And she said that she went to both India and China, two countries I've not yet been to. And she said while she looked more like the Indians, she felt through her toes the Chinese connection when she came to China. So long answer to yes, I would actually like to go to those countries.
And your sister lives here in Providence?
She lives in Florida.
Oh, you said you did.
Mhm.
So you're happy that you settled here?
So my son said, you know, that my husband, this guy here, has his own melting pot. Yes, yes, I'm happy I settled here. We grew up together basically. So I started dating him when I was about my daughter's age, actually. And he actually has, like my son said, he has Native American genes and like his mother was actually a sharecropper. And then he has blonde hair on his arms. It's really bizarre. So but he's my heart. So, you know, I could not settle where he is not. Any other questions? This is actually fun. Thank you, guys. I was so nervous.
Is the skirt you have on Jamaican?
My mom bought this. I'm not sure she bought it at a flea market, but I thought it was festive.
It's so
Well, thank you so much. It was really a good story and it's just amazing to think about. I think we'll all go home and think about all those different connections in one body.
Right.
And I forgot to say this at the beginning, please help yourself to the snacks that Lausanne has provided for us so nicely. And there are pictures back there that you can look at as well, and mentioned a little booklet, we can all learn to speak.
Yes, yes, please.
Our next program will be on a Monday evening, April 22nd. The library kind of gave away our Tuesdays for the next couple of months, so we're going to be jumping around a bit, but it'll be Monday, April 22nd. And we're still in negotiation for our speaker, so can't announce that yet, but we hope to see you then.
So then if you have someone interesting, like with that, then let us know. Reel her in.